She was wealthy, educated, and walked the most crowded street in New York, in broad daylight. Yet within minutes, she was gone, as if the city itself had swallowed her whole. December 12, 1910, Dorothy Arnold stepped out of her family's mansion on East 79th Street for what should have been a simple shopping trip. She never came home, and what happened next would baffle investigators for over a century. Manhattan in 1910 was a city of extremes. Steel skyscrapers rose beside Gilded Age mansions, while horse-drawn carriages shared the streets with early automobiles. It was here that 25-year-old Dorothy Arnold lived what looked like a perfect life. The Arnolds weren't just wealthy, they were Manhattan royalty. Frances Arnold was an importer of perfumes and fine goods, while Mary Arnold was a pillar of New York society. But Dorothy wanted something different. She wanted to write. For a young woman of her class in 1910, this was far from typical. While her parents expected charity luncheons and an advantageous marriage, Dorothy spent her time crafting stories and dreaming of publication. She'd already faced rejection from McClure's magazine. Her father blocked her plan to move to Greenwich Village, insisting a good writer can write anywhere. That December morning, Dorothy told her mother she was buying an evening dress for her sister Marjorie's debutante ball. She carried about $30, roughly $1,000 in today's money, and seemed cheerful. Around 11 a.m., she walked down Fifth Avenue toward the shopping district. At Brentano's bookstore, she bought Engaged Girls Sketches by Emily Calvin Blake. Then, around 2 p.m. near 27th and 5th Avenue, she encountered Gladys King, a friend from her social circle. They chatted briefly about the upcoming ball. Gladys later remembered Dorothy seemed perfectly normal, even mentioning she planned to walk through Central Park before heading home. That was the last confirmed sighting of Dorothy Arnold. When she didn't return for dinner, her parents weren't immediately worried. But by the next morning, the Arnolds knew something was terribly wrong.
The Arnold family, being who they were, initially handled Dorothy's disappearance privately. They hired the Pinkerton Detective Agency and avoided police involvement for weeks, terrified of scandal. After 6 weeks yielded nothing, they went public. The story quickly became national headlines. Thousands of tips poured in. Most led nowhere. Then came the tip that should have changed everything. In April 1916, while imprisoned in Rhode Island for attempted extortion, Edward Glenoris claimed he had been paid $250 to help dispose of a young woman's body shortly after Dorothy vanished. He said it had been buried in a cellar in New Rochelle. Authorities excavated several cellars and nearby sites, but found nothing. Under further questioning, Glenoris contradicted himself, and investigators dismissed the lead as unreliable. The episode left behind a haunting possibility. The Dorothy hadn't simply vanished. Someone had hidden her. Over the years, investigators have focused on 2 theories that connect directly to who Dorothy was and her world. The first couldn't be spoken about openly in 1910, only whispered in private. In early 20th century New York, wealthy women facing certain complications had discreet options. There were private doctors, secret clinics where delicate situations could be handled away from society's eyes. Dorothy had been corresponding with George Griscom Jr., a man her parents disapproved of. Some speculated she might have found herself requiring immediate private medical attention. These procedures, performed in hidden locations, carried enormous risks. The theory suggests Dorothy sought such help and never returned, either due to complications or shame. The packages, her route, the money she carried, it all fits. No evidence was ever found, but in 1910, such evidence was carefully hidden. The second theory is perhaps more heartbreaking. Dorothy didn't just want to write, she needed to. It was her identity, her passion. But every door was closing. Publishers rejected her work, her father belittled her dreams, and society expected her to abandon ambitions for marriage. Some believe Dorothy chose to vanish. This theory suggests she used her money and jewelry to start over elsewhere. Maybe she took a train to another city, found work under a different name, finally lived the independent life she craved. Dorothy's letters reveal a young woman struggling with despair and frustration. She wrote about failure staring her in the face and how her mother would always think an accident had happened. To someone that hungry for freedom, disappearing might have seemed like the only escape. The timing supports this too. December was the month of her sister's grand coming-out ball. At 25, Dorothy felt the weight of expectations, but was young enough to believe she could start over. Perhaps that walk through Central Park wasn't a detour home, but a step towards something else entirely.
So we returned to Fifth Avenue on that December morning in 1910. A young woman walking down America's busiest street, surrounded by hundreds of people, yet somehow stepping out of existence entirely. Dorothy Arnold wanted to be remembered for her stories. Instead, she became part of a mystery that still haunts America more than a century later. Her disappearance has outlasted the Gilded Age mansions, the social expectations that constrained her, even most people who knew her. Despite months of private and police searches and even a public reward, the case eventually went cold. The Arnolds searched for years, but took their secrets to their graves. Francis Arnold died in 1922, convinced his daughter was gone. Mary Arnold lived until 1928, and contemporaneous accounts noted she remained hopeful Dorothy was alive. Whether Dorothy met with foul play or chose her own disappearance, her story reflects the struggles of countless women in 1910 who felt trapped between society's expectations and their heart's demands. She lived in a world where even voting or working freely was beyond reach, where independence came at the cost of scandal. Her story endures because it speaks to something universal: the desire to control our own destiny, even when the world seems determined to choose for us. So, what do you think? Would you see her as a victim of hidden dangers or as someone bold enough to write her own ending? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoy stories the history books forgot to tell, join us for the next mystery.